I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist, Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stat.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
But I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
gun. Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. I've got a little bit of spare time this evening, and I wanted to have this guy on my show recently and wasn't able to make it happen, so we're going to squeeze it in here. You guys remember I had Marc Victor on my podcast last week. Well, he threw everybody a curveball and dropped out and endorsed Blake Masters, which was something he explicitly said he was not planning on doing. He did talk about wanting to have a conversation and saying that the only way he would concede if he honestly felt that Blake Masters, represented his ideas enough. And apparently he felt that way. However, he seemed a lot more skeptical of that when he was on my show. But anyway, back on the show again, just about exactly a year later from the last time he was on. Actually, we've got Kyle Matovcik of the In Liberty and Health podcast. How are you doing today, man?
Excellent, man. Great to be here with you.
So how's your first year of podcasting been? Has it been, most people I don't think make it a whole year. So you're like, you've made it to your anniversary roughly. How's it going?
Pretty good. 146 episodes recorded and decent bit of downloads. Could always do better, but I feel like for the first year I did pretty well, and I have no plans of stopping, and I'm looking forward to having you on, I think, next week with a couple other guys, and I'm really excited for the conversation there.
Yeah, so you have kind of carved out a unique niche for your podcast. Like, so many libertarians want to start a podcast, and then it's just like, oh, the non-aggression principle, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing. Or like, what is libertarianism? Some generic dumb bullshit. But you have really kind of carved out the populist versus like principled libertarian strategies. And you've really talked to a lot of people, Tho Bishop, and then like the Libertarian Institute guys, and like the more right-wing populist guys like Pete Quinones or Buck Johnson, people like that, to try to kind of really figure this out. How's that been? Is that accurate to say that that's kind of been your corner that you've gone for, and what's that been like?
Yeah, honestly, it's been really good, and it's kind of funny because one of the guys from Hopian.org, him and I actually went to high school together, and he lives probably like within a half hour from me. And I've really enjoyed having those conversations. I did 4 specific episodes, and you were a part of one of them, where we talked strictly about strategy going forward, whether you should do the populist GOP route or maybe do the Libertarian Party. And it seems like those conversations not only are kind of well desired by the people, but for me, I found them very, very enjoyable. And I never quite feel satisfied at the end of the day. But just with the populist right, as you and I have talked about a lot, just this growing Cold War with China seems to be a really, really big issue. And over the last couple of months, I've done quite a bit of digging, and I think I see a lot more incentives where I didn't necessarily see them before. But the strategy conversation is always a fun one. And like I said, I don't know where I fall on it, but at the end of the day, it does seem like we're going to have a pretty big red wave, and I don't think people are going to get what they're bargaining for, if you know what I mean. Like they're not.
I don't know what you're talking about. The Senate race in Pennsylvania is incredible. Like, I don't know if I could feel any better represented than if I lived in Pennsylvania right now. I mean, you've got, as Justin O'Donnell said, you have a fake doctor running against a fake person. It's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, he's like a geriatric outpatient Dr. Gru or something like that. That's probably one of the best ways I could describe him. Versus like a snake oil salesman, you got like a dude pretending to be a person versus a guy pretending to be a Republican. But they're really not that far apart on the issues. I mean, they're both pro-choice, Oz to a lesser degree, Fetterman said that China's the number one enemy. So it's like, okay, big shocker. And then if you look on Dr. Oz's website, he says we got to get tough on China. They're really not that far apart, but it's just, basically you see all these people fucking hacking it up for Oz because they want the Republicans to have the majority. But I'm like, man, I get wanting the Republicans to have like the majority, but you guys could just like stay out of this one, because I would be embarrassed to leave the house saying, oh, I endorse Dr. Oz. And I can't tell you how many people bust my balls about it, but like, look, at some point you got to say, dude, this shit's a fucking joke. But you and I were shooting the shit off air, and yeah, Fetterman, it's almost like I almost want to pull the card for him, just because it's like, can you imagine all the pauses if he's getting grilled? Just, I support, I don't always. I support fracking. Like,
yeah, dude, I want him in the Senate. I'm not even kidding. Like, if I lived in Pennsylvania, I would unironically cast a ballot for Fetterman. Like, no, I wouldn't even have to think about it. I would try to vote twice. I would try to commit voter fraud for Fetterman. Like, I want that guy to be senator so bad. And then, right behind him is Herschel Walker. I want both of them in there. I want them to get in some sort of argument on the Senate floor. I want to see Fetterman try to do a filibuster. That would be incredible. I mean, I'm just here for all of it, man. Like, we're so far past the point of realistically expecting any policies that we want to be implemented. So might as well just go full clown car, and that's where we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's a reasonable assessment, and I find myself saying, you know what? I'm kind of thankful that Biden's in there, because it's so just blatantly awful. Like, I can't even muster the anger that I see a lot of people just are absolutely filled with, just because it's so, I don't know. I can't add anything to that conversation, because everything that everybody's criticizing him for, they're absolutely correct. But like, I feel bad. He's literally a walking corpse, and there's just constant videos of people just guiding him one way or the other because he doesn't know where he's going. But I feel like it would be a lot of the same deal with Fetterman. And then especially considering that he's going to continue to get older and less healthy, more than likely it's just going to be, like a younger version of Joe Biden, but just as geriatric.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I am not excited for these midterms. Like, I don't really care either. Like, I'm not dreading them either. I'm just like, I expect a clean sweep with the red, I expect a red wave like you do. I think Blake Masters will win. I think Dr. Oz will win now. I think Don Baldick's going to win here in New Hampshire. I think Herschel Walker's going to win in Georgia. And, then all the incumbents, I think most of them are going to win too. Like, definitely Rand Paul, Mike Lee, like all those guys, which with them, it's a good thing they're staying in there. But
right.
Yeah, a lot of the people who are going to win, I'm just like, I mean, first of all, it's a federal office. A lot of people are forgetting that. They're complaining about, statewide issues. Mm-hmm. Like, will abortion be illegal in my state? Or what is what is something going to be in my state is pertaining to minimum wage or something? It's like, the only way that they control that is if they pass a federal law. Like, I mean, so many people are talking about state-specific issues when they don't realize this is nationwide stuff. Like, we're not talking I mean, if you're voting for governor, that's one thing. Or if you're voting for people in your state legislature, that's one thing. But this is a whole different issue. And as far as federal issues go, all these guys suck. Like, I mean, some of them are a little bit better than others, but and we'll get into the Blake Masters thing. I will say, even though I don't like Blake Masters, I think he is one of the few that is actually better than his opponent. With the other ones, I literally don't see a difference. Like, I don't really care at all. Like, he's a little bit better, but yeah, man, I'm not optimistic. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I've definitely been taking the black pills recently too, as much as I hate to say that, just because it is pretty abysmal we're looking at, and especially just seeing how little difference there really is. And despite what people want you to believe, there really isn't substantial difference on a lot of these different elections. Like, a lot of these people just have the same fucking views. And in particular with the Blake Masters deal, I don't know if you want to get into that now, but it just seems like the concessions and Mark Victor kind of throwing his hands up and saying, I'm going to put my weight behind this guy, was given pretty haphazardly. Like, he didn't push him on anything. And even when some of our own leaders were kind of pushing back against him on some of the stuff that he's been notably bad on, they didn't really put up much of a fight. And I get it, because to a degree, you're inviting someone on your podcast and you're going to treat them with respect, and you don't want to, torture them. But at the same time, if we're going to have any kind of political leverage, then why shouldn't we use that? And it really seems like that wasn't used.
Yeah, so I had Austin Peterson on my show last week, and he gave some opinions that I was definitely in disagreement with, but I didn't grill him on them because he's not running for anything. And I asked him to come on as a friend just to talk about some stuff. And I actually mostly wanted to talk about the midterms, and then the war in Ukraine ended up taking up like half the episode. But people were like, even, why didn't you push back hard on him while he was on your show? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I just didn't feel it necessary. But when I had Mark Victor on, I actually, I told him ahead of time, like, look, I want to talk to you about specific issues. And like, if you are to endorse either of the other candidates, you need to demand some sort of concession. So I told him up front, and then you watched the episode, right? Like, I wasn't mean or anything, but I pushed him pretty hard on some stuff. And then even Mark Victor wasn't willing to say that we should leave NATO, or that we shouldn't, have a contractual obligation to defend Israel. And I was just like, dude, I mean, you're the Libertarian. You're supposed to have like, demonstrably better views than the Republican. But so I even told him at the end, I said, look, I think you really need to extort both of these candidates if either of them want to get your support.
Right.
And I did watch Blake on the Liberty Report and on Part of the Problem, and I don't think either of them pushed him hard at all. I mean, it was barely an interview on the tough questions. It wasn't even like clarifying, what did you mean when you said this? There's a little bit of that. But if I could have done that interview, it would have been like, hey, you said this. Like, on your website, it says that we need to fight, or I forget the exact wording, but we need to only fight wars to protect our allies, like Israel.
On his website, it says, as your senator, I will get rid of quote unquote wokeness in our military, which it's like, woke when you see it. But the problem is, too many people use this as just kind of like a blanket term for shit that they don't like. And then right after that, it's to support military action only in defense of the U.S. and our allies like Israel. Remind everybody that the job of our military is not to export democracy abroad, which I agree with. That's fine. And then where is it? Yeah, get tough on China, by far our top geopolitical rival. And that's strong and smart, or under his defense plan. So if we're going to be defending our allies, Israel, what does that mean? Where does that start? Where does it end? Because we're already giving them billions of dollars every year to basically maintain the open air prison they have over there.
And they're also like the reason we're so fucking hawkish on Iran all the time.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with us. That has to do with Israel. They're one of the huge reasons we invaded Iraq in 2003. Like, it's not like, we would, it's not like this is some abstract idea that we would have to go in there if Iran suddenly decided to come up with nukes and nuke Tel Aviv or something. Like, this has already been a thing. This is why we've gotten involved in so many of these entanglements over there in the first place. That's always the justification for it.
Yeah, and I put out a tweet the other day saying, as long as the populist right is going to be beholden to Israel and hawkish on China, there'll never be a principled anti-war movement, because that Israel is going to drag them into another, conflict whenever they see necessary, because you're seeing all these assassinations kind of going on over in Iran, and Israel's also doing some bombing campaigns in Syria, I believe, and we can't do anything about it because we're just, once again, selling them arms. We're sending them tons of money. And you've laid this out very, very well as well. But this whole populist movement, I don't think it was really this upswell of anti-war. It wasn't like an upswell in an anti-war movement, because basically everybody's rejected regime change, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. But now you bring up China to these people, and they're so fixated on it. And even a lot of libertarians buy this shit, which is mind-boggling to me. All the same people that reject all the propaganda from the last 20 years, for some reason, we repeated about China. It has to be true. And once again, you and I have discussed before, there's even people in leadership that aren't that good on this. And it's like, hey, this will be the next big push. We're definitely, kind of poking the bear here when it comes to sailing warships through the Taiwan Strait, doing military drills over there. We have army bases over there. We're training their military. So China's repeatedly said that they want peaceful unification, but we're giving them every reason not to do that. We keep sending congressional delegations, and nobody talks about that. We could talk about all day about how, China's committing a genocide on the Uyghurs, which is false. They're a hostile actor on the world stage. They're sending in all this fentanyl, which when you actually dig into it, it's not necessarily China or the CCP themselves, because they've actually tried to crack down on this. And I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with them, cracking down, but they're not trying to have it exported here. But for some reason, we just blame China as a whole for that. But whenever it comes to these escalations, you never hear anybody on the populist right call it out. They never say, hey, we shouldn't be provoking China into a war. We should be trying to strengthen our own economy so that way we don't have to depend on them as much. If they were doing that, I'd be 100% behind them, but they never do that. They hawk it up, and then whenever it gets to like actual military policy, they just completely turn the other cheek. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene said once, like, we shouldn't unnecessarily provoke them by sending Pelosi to Taiwan, but she's still one of the worst hawks on China as well. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that the populist right has become anti-war is dumb, because in a lot of ways they've gotten worse. So instead of Iraq and Iran, now it's China and Iran that they want to fight. Right. It's just like, I'd rather fight Iraq than China personally. Like, I think that's a move in the absolute wrong direction. But yeah, I mean, dude, it was crazy. Blake said that on Dave's show that, China could be landing on our shores pretty soon. Yeah. Or, and the thing is, like, watching both of these interviews, obviously Ron Paul and Dan McAdams and Dave are going to try to pull him in a libertarian direction, right? So when they were leading the conversation, things sounded pretty good, but Blake never pushed things in that direction himself. Whenever he was talking, it was all about, like, the reason it's atrocious that 40 or $67 billion have been sent to Ukraine is because we need 12 billion of it here to build our own border wall, or because we should be opposing our real enemies like China. It's just like, I mean, whenever he's at the helm, and you look at like 98% of his content he puts out on Twitter, his ads, like, none of them are talking about trying to de-escalate tensions with Russia. None of them are. I mean, he'll give platitudes about, yeah, I oppose endless wars and endless spending, but dude, platitudes about endless wars. Bill Kristol, remember when he was debating Scott Horton, he even told Bill Kristol, like, yeah, I'm an anti-war person. It's like, what? Like, anybody can say that, especially if they're prodded into saying it. So I don't know. I was just really unimpressed. I feel like I actually, and Justin Amash disagrees with this from the tweets he's been making lately. He thinks the only point of the Libertarian Party is to run candidates to win, and he hates the Kingmaker strategy. I actually disagree with that. I think that the Kingmaker strategy is great, because I think that's the only power we have as libertarians. Like, we don't have any power over elections as far as winning them. We can't, unless it's like some local thing, then you can win. But on a statewide level, or nationwide level especially, definitely can't win. So if there's someone who has a proclivity toward libertarianism, if we can extort them in that direction, even if they don't follow through on what they say they're going to do, it's good optics, and it sends a message to the Republicans that, like, look, if you want to win, you've got to court our vote. Like, this is where the left has really fucked up, because the left has proven to the Democrats, you don't need to cater to us at all. You can fucking steal both elections from us in the primary, rig the fuck out of it, and we'll still vote for you. I mean, in 2016, it was a lot closer. So, I mean, sorry, there was the Democrats lost, so you could kind of say that. But then with Biden, they won. So there's like really no proof. And then even in 2016, it wasn't like tons and tons and tons of people stayed home. The popular vote actually went to Hillary Clinton. So it wasn't like this strong middle finger to the Democrats from the true anti-war left-wingers,
right,
where I think we should be sending that message to the Republicans. Like, dude, just because you're going to lower taxes a little bit and you're going to, make some vagaries about how we shouldn't be in wars forever, that's not enough to get my support.
Right.
But
yeah, I agree completely. And this is my whole problem with Mark Victor dropping out, was that there weren't enough concessions given, because nobody pushed back on Israel. No one pushed back on the China stuff other than Dave a little bit. And Blake came back with the chips argument. Oh, my chips in Taiwan. Okay, well, what these people fail to understand is that China is largely a globally dependent economy. Like, they need others. I think they're largely globally dependent for like all their grains and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. I might have that backwards, but regardless, they still need a lot of outside, imports to kind of keep their economy functioning and running. So that kind of refutes that argument pretty quick. So, and I understand, hey, we should have a good relationship with Taiwan, but like this militarily, we can't do this. And this idea that they're going to be on our shores, they're a crumbling empire. They're a paper tiger. They did what they did to their economy, what the U.S. has done to their economy in 25 years versus where it's taken us over 100 years. So this idea that you're going to see the Chi-Coms coming up on California's coast, it's just so alarmist and ridiculous. And the fact that nobody said, like, dude, you don't really believe this. And there's people that are saying this is just campaign rhetoric. Look, I hope so. I really hope that he goes in there and he pulls Rand Paul over to being better on Israel, right? I hope that he pulls Rand Paul into being this, the same figure that his dad was. Do I think he's going to do it? Honestly, I don't think so. I think it's going to be one big old fucking letdown, and you're still going to have all these people who like him for the stuff that he is good on, that are just going to suck his dick and say that he can do no wrong. And, we're going to be, it's going to be satanic panic by 2026. I'm calling it right here.
So what do you think he is explicitly good on? Because the only reason I say that he's better is just because Mark Kelly is so awful. Like, I don't think Mark Kelly is good on anything. But what do you think Blake is like explicitly good on?
When it comes to the immigration stuff, he's a little extreme, but I understand the arguments for kind of closing the borders. The gun stuff, he's obviously good on. He is pro Bitcoin, and he's good on currency as well. So all that stuff I'm really into.
But do you think it's like, because he, when in the interviews, he would say the ridiculous spending of the last 22 months, and who was president 23 months ago.
Right.
And so, and like, we used to have a good president who was smart about his, his power as the head executive or whatever. And
he was good on foreign policy.
Yeah. Like, so, you can say these things like, yeah, we need sound money. We need less spending. But Ted Cruz would also say that. And look at Ted Cruz. He voted to send $40 billion to Ukraine. Maybe the gun thing, like, yeah, he probably is good on that, and maybe he wouldn't sell out on something like that. But dude, even like the immigration thing, I know I am a more open borders libertarian than a lot, but even if you're like someone who thinks, yeah, we should have a secure border, this guy wants to add thousands of border patrol agents, which creates more of a bureaucracy. He wants to militarize the border. He wants to build a wall. And I know a lot of people haven't lived in Arizona, where Blake is from, but when I lived there in 2015, they had checkpoints that you had to go through where they stopped every single car. I think any vessel within 100 miles of the Border Patrol has full authority to stop you and, confiscate your property and stuff. They can't enter a house because they need a warrant to enter a house, but any ship, boat, plane, car, anything, any vessel they can enter within 100 miles of the border. So like, I don't care what you think about immigration or like what you think about Mexicans stealing our jobs or ruin our culture or whatever it is anybody thinks. That's not okay. And he's like 100% on board with that stuff. And it's because of his ties to his Peter Thiel companies that get, tons of contracts with the Border Patrol. That's where it comes from. So I don't know. That's very concerning to me too.
Yeah. And there's a lot of propaganda on the right about the border stuff, and I don't claim to have expertise knowledge on this. I hear so many people saying there's, you know, hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border every day, and some of it seems a little bit drummed up. And I'm sure there's a concern there, but I don't think people look at the full picture. People just read the headlines when it comes to, oh, you have all these people immigrating over, so, you know, you have to be worried about this, and, you know, vote for me and I'll fix it. But, you know, surely enough, it never gets fixed. Like I said, he talks good now, but then also the campaign rhetoric stuff that we've kind of been elaborating on throughout the show so far. How much do you believe, and how much is he actually going to work with? I don't think I'm very optimistic for him as a senator, and the intellectual dishonesty of him not criticizing Trump for spending just blows my fucking mind. And then also the same deal with not criticizing foreign policy blows my mind. Like, it just, I can't stand this intellectual dishonesty where people want to unnecessarily suck Trump's dick for every single reason that they could possibly find and try to excuse everything bad that he ever did. Because I'm sure you noticed this too. People say, oh, it was a deep state. No, everybody was against him. But then you look, and half the time he was for a lot of this shit. Like the stimulus checks.
Yeah. It couldn't be done quickly enough. He couldn't get the CARES Act on his desk quickly enough. You know, wanted to kick Thomas Massie out of the Republican Party for not even opposing it, but just asking for a recorded vote.
Right.
You know, like, the thing is too, like, people are trying to unironically say that, and we don't know yet because we haven't seen this guy in office, so I will concede that, but they're saying he will be better than Rand Paul. And so I have a couple points on this. One is, on a bell curve, Rand is pretty good, but man, like, if you compare him to how he ran his campaign in 2010, he has fallen so far. So this idea that someone would be like undercover libertarian and then get in there and then suddenly be perfect is just ridiculous. I mean, if anything, it's always the opposite way. They start out okay, and then over time they get worse and worse and worse. But I mean, if we just compare them on a few things, one is the hypocrisy over the Republicans versus the Democrats spending money. Like, Rand Paul, even though to a large extent he did suck Trump's dick, he voted against Trump more than any other Republican senator. And he was constantly talking about how they were spending too much money. He was constantly trying to block arms sales to Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. I'm not getting the vibes that Blake Masters would even be willing to do any of that stuff, you know? So, I mean, if Rand Paul is the bar we're aiming for, I don't see it. Like, I don't see him even reaching it. I see him falling far below it. But
no, I don't see a path to that either, to be completely honest with you. And, you know, as a guy who supposedly read all the Mises and Rothbard and was involved with the Mises Institute, it's like, you know, Israel is probably the greatest threat to the country. Like, they literally shape the way all the concerns that people have about China. You can literally,
they're true about Israel.
They're true about Israel, but we can't say anything about that. And to Robbie Martin's credit, he's the one that kind of put that in my mind. And then literally when you start just kind of going down the list, it's like, oh, they put people in camps. Check. You know, they influence our politicians. Check. Like,
and on top of all of that, they sell shit to the Chinese that we give to them for free.
It's so fucking bizarre to me. And I don't know, when you see him say that we're going to defend our allies like Israel, it's like, okay, well, you're wanting us to go out on a limb and just trust this guy, but like, that's a pretty big leap of faith when he just sounds like another fucking Ted Cruz. And for all we know, he could go in there and be another Ted Cruz. And if he was, wouldn't be surprised one bit, because actually Rand Paul and Ron Paul both kind of endorsed Ted Cruz early on.
Yeah.
But then look how that shook out.
Yeah, here's the other thing is, like, I don't know why people care so much about endorsements. So here in New Hampshire, Don Baldock, who's an awful neocon, warmongering Republican, he got the endorsement of both Tulsi Gabbard and Rand Paul. And so many people were shocked. And I'll be honest, I was a little surprised by the Tulsi one, but not so much like that it was unprincipled, more like, what are you doing? I don't get it. Like, I didn't understand, like, the point of it. Why come to New Hampshire and campaign for this random Republican? Makes no sense. From Rand Paul's perspective, even though I disagree with it, I understand it more because this is what Rand does. He wants the Senate majority to be Republican because he's a team player. For Tulsi, it's like, what? Like, I just don't really get it. Maybe I'm sure we'll find out further down the road why she's doing this. But All that to say, like, people's endorsements really don't mean much, especially if you look at other things they've endorsed. So like Tulsi Gabbard endorsed Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and then Rand Paul supported, Mitt Romney while his dad was still in the race. He also voted to confirm Mike Pompeo. And then he's also, a diehard Trump supporter. He voted for Lloyd Austin for Secretary of Defense too. Like, people forget that too. So it's like, okay. And then like people that I have a lot more respect for, like Dave and Ron Paul and Dan McAdams, like they are like leaps and bounds better. But still, just because they endorse someone, why does that mean that we all have to fall in line? Like, we all can disagree, and disagreeing with an endorsement doesn't mean that you think somebody's trash. Like, it's undeniable, despite all their faults, that Rand Paul and Tulsi Gabbard have been, very effective in the anti-war movement by raising awareness about certain things, like the war in Yemen, not arming terrorists in Syria. Like, there's tons of stuff that they've done that is good. But to just go along with who they say we should vote for because they've done these good things, like, that's crap. Like, as I feel the same way with, and I think, to Dave's credit, like, he hasn't suggested that anyone else should feel the same way as he does. Like, this is just what he thinks or whatever. But there is like this dogmatic, follow the leader thing that goes on, not just in the liberty movement, it's everywhere. But it's like, guys, just think for yourselves. Like, just because someone you respect says that he's supporting someone doesn't mean you should, like, try to do a little bit of thinking about it yourselves. And if you disagree with me at the end of the day, like, if you think, you know what, Reed, I think that, endorsing Blake Masters and Mark Victor dropping out of the race is the best thing for liberty. Okay, fine. That's your opinion. But at least think about it and come to your own conclusion instead of just going with whatever your favorite thought leader says. Because, if I'm your favorite thought leader, which I wouldn't even call myself that, but if I am, don't listen to whatever I say. Like, take the advice of other people to try to come up with your own conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I've found myself disagreeing with, different people's endorsements through, at different times. And that's perfectly fine. Like you said, think for yourself, because I definitely wouldn't throw my hat behind anybody who's hawkish on China. Tulsi just endorsed JD Vance. And there is an entertaining game where you literally go into any Republican's Twitter profile and you just type in China, and you'll get a whole litany of tweets about how, China's our number one enemy. And especially on the populist right, we got to build up to confront China. Like, Joe Kent was horrible on this, and people prop him up. And I don't know. It's just upsetting to see nobody ask for the concessions. Like, hey, this situation is not good. And then even the fact that Blake Masters literally carries the same position on all of the things. Israel, initially Ukraine, and China is the regime as the Biden regime. I mean, there would be no difference in February Blake's statement to Biden's. We should sanction Russia. We should support the Ukrainian people and
keep our military out of this. Same thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. There's no difference. And then all this, once again, all these people say it's Beijing Biden. Okay, well, he's been incredibly hawkish on China the entire time. And he's repeatedly said that if something happened in Taiwan, that we would militarily, defend Taiwan. But, we're still supposed to believe that he's just in China's pocket. Like, these stupid motherfuckers like Mike Cernovich, the Hodge twins, who, don't get me wrong, I agree with them on some stuff and I've watched them, but they'll sit there and still say, oh, well, why is he doing this with China now? It's like, you guys don't understand. There's this fucking narrative that won't die on the right that, oh, well, Biden's not tough enough on China, but people just are fucking out to lunch on this. And I can't for the life of me figure out why.
Yeah, did you see the Ron Paul Institute actually like tweeted at Blake Masters after it was so funny. But Blake Masters tweeted a picture of himself with Ron Paul saying, "Yeah, I'm super proud to get Ron Paul's endorsement." And then the Ron Paul Institute replied, "Blake, we love you, but you need to drop your neocon foreign policy. Sanctions are always bad, and China is not our enemy," or whatever. I was like, whoa. It's pretty crazy to see. It was almost like We didn't really endorse you, buddy. We just we like some stuff about you or something. I didn't really know how to read into that one, but it was pretty funny to see.
Yeah, well, I think Dan wanted to push back on him more, but I think Dan also understands that, the Ron Paul Liberty Report is in his show. But yeah, the tweet read out, Blake, you're great, but you need to drop your neocon foreign policy. China's not an enemy and sanctions are always idiotic. The U.S. warfare state hates you and is doing everything they can to deny you a Senate seat. Why suck up to them? Contact us, we can guide you. But yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable response to say, hey, the neocons don't care about regime change anymore, right? I mean, that's dead. Nobody believes in that anymore. But the next thing is the great power struggles and the national defense strategies. Every single time they redo it, which I think it's every 4 years, they just redid it and they still have China's number one. So I don't understand why they feel compelled to carry water for the worst people in the fucking government. For some reason, they just have to hawk it up on China. And to me, it kind of seems like the left with racism, systemic racism, and stuff like that. If you can blame China and you can blame election fraud, then you can grift for votes. And then the left, if you can grift for racism, then you can get votes. It's the same fucking thing in my mind.
Corporate greed and racism and then election fraud in China. Those are the two boogeymen. Let's see. So this is actually a fair point. Masters only supports non-military humanitarian aid to Ukraine, which is substantially different than the regime. That is true. However, I believe in the tweet from March or whatever it was.
It was February. Yeah, he did call for sanctions.
He definitely called for sanctions, but he also said we should aid the Ukrainians in their war against Russia, which to me is intentionally vague. Okay, let's say the Republicans end up fully endorsing, we need to just go toe-to-toe with Russia. Then you look good from the beginning because you've said, I have said we need to support the Ukrainians. And then if not, if we're in the situation where we are now, where with a lot of the Republicans, it's unpopular, you can be like, well, I never said weapons. But I mean, if you meant non-humanitarian aid, why wouldn't you say that in the beginning? We should just send humanitarian aid to them, not weapons. I don't really buy it personally. I don't think it's a good enough excuse. So fuck you, Daniel, Jacob, Winograd, whatever your name is.
Well, he's a fellow mechanic and a GM guy, so I'd take it a little bit easier.
And he's a Pennsylvanian.
Yes.
I don't know if he supports Fetterman like I do, but I definitely support Fetterman. Number one, go Fetterman.
Yeah. Now, the longer I think about it, the more I think I want to see the memes, and I support Fetterman. I don't think he's going to win, but it just as we kind of.
I am going to try to drive down to Pennsylvania on election day and vote for him and see if this election fraud stuff is real. I'm gonna test it, and I'm gonna try to cast 1,000 ballots for Fetterman. I might even get in with the I'll destroy all the ballots that I can that are going to Oz. I'll do whatever I can. So.
Yeah, no, I'm completely there with you. We could totally do that. Fake some ballots. Do the ballot dumps. Maybe they'll make another 2,000.
There we go. We got the official Daniel 3 podcast endorsement for Fetterman.
There we go. Nice. I like it. It's I just would have liked to see more concessions before Mark Victor threw his hat behind Blake, though. And like I said, that just didn't seem to be done. And I think you and I agree on this, and a lot of people in the Libertarian Party seem to agree on this, that if we're going to be using the Libertarian Party, then it should be, as we've kind of said, to extort votes and to get concessions from Republicans who are liberty-leaning. But in this scenario, that just definitely didn't shake out, because they didn't get him to improve his position on China. They didn't get him to improve his position on Israel. And they didn't even get him to walk back saying that we should sanction Russia, of all fucking things.
Yeah, he just said that? He was upset that the sanctions weren't used strategically, and basically that now we've already played that card, so what can we do now? It was it's kind of like Baldick here in New Hampshire. His criticism of Biden isn't that he's escalating us toward a major armed conflict with Russia. It's just the strategy of how he's done it. And you've seen the clip, I'm sure, on Twitter many times of him wanting to interdict Russian troops and get CIA and special forces on the ground, which, by the way, I saw Pat McFarland post something on Twitter. Apparently there are U.S. ground troops in Ukraine now. That is a thing. So great.
No, I'll have to check that out. I didn't see that, but that certainly doesn't surprise me. I did make a mistake earlier when I quote tweeted Tulsi, and I said Tulsi posting her L's when she came out and endorsed JD Vance, although I'm not sure how much I take it back, because I know Vance is a China hawk. It was Senator Josh Hawley who voted no on adding Sweden and Finland in NATO, which at first, when you hear about it, it sounds good. But then his reasoning was because we like weren't tough enough on Russia or something like that. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, this is straight up fucking clown world.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, that was one of Rand Paul's bad moments. Rand Paul voted present. It's like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, at least you didn't vote for it, I guess. But what the fuck, dude? Like, out of all the votes to, you know, send a message, this one you fuck up with, like, dude, that's the thing with Rand. And sorry, I'm gonna go on a little Rand hating rant here, but he deserves it. Like, I mean, people who watch this show know that I support Rand compared to the rest of the Senate. So from this show, like, criticizing him is fair in my opinion. And he chooses the dumbest fucking hills to die on ever. It's just like, dude, why? I mean, like, he'll die on the hill of the 9/11 victim fund, you know, like blocking that, but then he'll vote for Mike Pompeo and Lloyd Austin. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? But I don't know. Do you agree with that? Like, he does that?
Yeah. And I really like Rand Paul because he was actually one of the people who first kind of got me down the road into more, I don't want to say like mainstream politics, but my friends told me that when I used to get hammered, I used to go on drunken tirades about how much I love Rand Paul. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for him, but he does kind of die on these ridiculous hills. And he's still doing these presentations every single year where he'll point on a clipboard about all this ridiculous spending. It's like, yes, we all agree, but you got to eventually do something. It's kind of like Ted Cruz tweeting out abolish the IRS. Like,
yeah,
are we going to take steps towards that, or what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, and Rand has had some amazing moments, like when he blocked that $40 billion to Ukraine. That was great. When he, you know, when he would stand up against like the ridiculous COVID funding that was going on. Definitely has great moments, but it's just like, man, dude, sometimes it really matters if you have an opinion and sometimes it doesn't. And it's on the ones that don't really matter if you have an opinion that he usually like throws everything into. And then the other ones where it really would look good if he took a stand, he'll just like, yeah. And it's like, come on, dude, what the heck? But I don't know that, like, I feel like that's our role as the Libertarian Party when we can't win, is to try to make these stands. Like when Rand Paul has made these courageous stands, it's usually just him or him and like 2 or 3 other people. Right. There's no way it's going to make a legislative difference, right? The bill is going to get passed into law, whatever. But it's about waking people up to what's going on. And the federal government is such a cesspool. It's not getting turned around. It's not getting saved. You know, if I ever ran for Congress or something, it would be solely to get a message out there about what's going on. Like, look at, you know, Ron Paul was in there, what, 20 something years overall, and nothing went in the direction that you would want it to. It's all the opposite. Like, we got more war, more spending, more violation of civil liberties, but he changed the way millions of people around the country think, which is what you got to do. So to me, like, when people are trying to berate you for, you know, real life differences that you're making politically on families around the country, like, bullshit, dude. It's the Senate. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, there's no political difference. Inflation is going to continue. They're not going to end any of these wars unless we elect like 10 people or something to, you know, actually flip the majority in the other direction. But when it's down to like 1 or 2 people, if these people aren't going to make a principled stand and be loud and point to an obvious problem, then I don't really see what the point is. Because I mean, you know, if there's like if there's a guy in Congress who votes 100% right on everything and we never hear his name, even though he did everything the right way, he's almost inconsequential in his existence there because no one knows about it. It makes no difference legislatively, and no one can be inspired and realize what's going on. So to me, a lot of it does come down to optics. And that's why I give Rand Paul such a hard time, even though he votes better than most people in Congress. And the other way sucks too. Like, if you're just good with your mouth, but then, you know, you just vote whatever way, you know, they tell you to do, that's crap too. But your voice does matter. And what you say does matter because it shapes the way people view the government.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And this is why I think the Libertarian Party has such a large potential, is because if you can kind of make this culture of people who appreciate what this country was founded on, then that can definitely complement getting to somewhere that we would want to get to as libertarians. And I think that's the aspect that a lot of people who criticize people who want to use the LP kind of miss out on, because I was a little lost on this. When I talked to Michael Heiss about it, he kind of brightened me up to this, that if we were all to just want to go into the GOP, then we're kind of entering this already established, the MAGA Republican kind of culture. And that's not us. And I'm not going to shut my mouth about the way that I feel about Trump and the way that he governed and the way that he, signed all the spending into law. I'm just not going to shut my mouth and not tell people the truth about this. I was in a little Twitter spat a couple weeks ago over somebody who said there were no wars under Trump. And I said, this is like a monumentally idiotic thing. And I was told that it was a progressive notion that you should tell people the truth. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but regardless, I think people should still know, so that way they're better informed when they go to the ballot box or when they want to make a change, that this is what you're up against. Because I'd rather know the ugly truth than have to, be in this complacency that, oh, everything's great, but Trump's signing all this money to, steal your future purchasing power. I'd much rather be informed than just live in this delusional bliss under the assumption that everything's going to be fine as long as I keep voting Republican.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm not necessarily opposed to a paleo strategy of becoming a Republican and running as a populist.
Right.
But I don't understand that strategy with the Libertarian Party. Like, there's a difference there. Like, if you want to do that, then yeah, go join the Republican Party and all, more power to you. I'm thinking of running for state representative here in New Hampshire in the next couple of years. I will probably run as a Republican because it's just easier to win. But the thing is, like, if we're going to be the Libertarian Party, then being Republican light or Democrat light is just crap. Like, why bother?
It's a losing strategy.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're going to vote for the Republican or the Democrat who has a greater chance than you. If you're just a better Republican or a better Democrat, it's not compelling enough to be like, all right, you know what, I'm ready for something new, and I want to, understand things in a different light. If it's just like, yeah, Trump could have been a little bit better on the wars and a little bit better on spending, and that's really what our message is, then it's like, okay, whatever. Like, yeah, he wasn't perfect, but I'll vote for him again. If our message is Donald Trump aided in a genocide in Yemen and drone bombed more people than Barack Obama did and drove our debt up like $7 trillion while he was president, then it's like, whoa, what? That's a different message. And I feel like if we're going to be the Libertarian Party, that's the message we got to go with, because and by the way, like, I think Dave does go with this message.
He does.
And like a lot of people who are in the Libertarian Party, there are just some who like want more concessions toward the Republicans, want us to be friendlier to the Republicans. And my whole point is like, no, we shouldn't be. If we're the Democrats, if we're Republicans, then that's a different thing. If you want to run as a Republican, do that. But I think, trying, like, some of the worry about like pissing off Tim Pool or pissing off right wingers.
Oh, don't get me started.
On top of that, doing this, it's not a good direction to be going in. I think it's worth talking about and saying, whoa. Like, we're saying a lot of the right stuff still, but like, let's be careful. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I completely agree with you again here that if we're going to run as libertarians, then you should be so unabashedly libertarian when you're in debates, when you're talking to people. The people need to know where you're coming from, because like you said, if we're just hardly separable from Republicans or anybody else, then what's the point? Like when you saw Shane I think the guy's name was Michael White, and he's running for what was it?
In Arkansas.
Okay. Yeah. When those guys were up on stage, I mean, they embarrassed the other candidates on stage, and it was absolutely wonderful to watch.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be the libertarian candidate, that should be it. You should be, like I said, so libertarian that you embarrass the other people on stage. That should be the goal. It shouldn't be to just, we're going to try to siphon off votes. No, you're there to send a message. And to your point about running as a Republican, if you're running as a Republican, then okay, I understand you have to be tailored a little bit more. But kind of turn it back to Blake Masters and what I think going forward. If you're going to explicitly say that I'm going to be a China hawk and I'm going to support Israel, you could just not have an opinion on those or not say anything about it. But, still kind of carry some of the more libertarian leaning Republican stuff, but just not have an opinion on those things. But when you have an opinion on those things, then all the liberty leaning people, at least of sane mind are going to be skeptical. And everybody seemed to agree when I said you should be skeptical of somebody who's a China hawk, said we should sanction Russia and be pro-Israel. Like, those are reasonable things for liberty-leaning people to be skeptical on. So if you're running as a Republican, I get it. You need to appeal to a wider audience. But if you're a libertarian, fuck everybody. Just be as libertarian as possible and send the fucking message.
Yeah, and then I think you can also be friendly with people like Tim Pool or, you know, you don't need to be a dick like all the time. I mean, LP New Hampshire's there for that, but not everybody needs to do that. Like, you know, some of you should be nice to people and like, but there's a difference between being nice to people and kind of being dishonest about who they are. Like Tim Pool just isn't one of us. He just isn't. And, you know, Donald Trump just isn't one of us. You know, or left wingers, you know, they're not us either. Like we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking they are. And then I'm all about single issue coalitions. Like I think Abby Martin is one of the most brave anti-war people out there. And there's other things I disagree with her on, but whatever, like we're 100% on that issue and several others. And then, you know, some conservatives are really good about, you know, sound money or something. And so, yeah, like 100% reach out to them and work with them on those one issues. But like, I think I was a little guilty of this maybe at first, like with people like Tulsi Gabbard, because they were right on a couple things, like being too welcoming to those type of people and saying like, yeah, this is basically what we support too. There's a difference between saying like this person is good on this one thing or these few things or these several things or whatever. But don't be mistaken about where we stand on these things. Like this is what we believe and we're going to stand firm on them. I think there's a, like, you don't have to fillet people to get them interested in you. And I think the opposite is actually true. I think they're less impressed with you if you do fillet them, you know, like if you are like, oh, you know, we're basically like you, please join us. You know, they're not going to be impressed. Whereas if you're like, motherfucker, this is what we stand for. This is what we believe in. And we will always stand up for it. It's more impressive to people who might disagree with you on a couple issues. And then maybe they'll hop on board, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think when people are on platforms, especially with people that you disagree with, you can find issues where you agree. But when it comes to the issues that you disagree on, you need to be firm in your position. There's a way to do this without being a complete total dick. But, you know, as I've always talked about, when Tim Pool starts China hawking it up, he should be pushed back on. And I haven't really seen sufficient pushback against him on that. And it's not like his talking points are hard to debunk. But, you know, you don't have to, like you said, suck these people's dicks. Just fucking tell them the truth. And then if you disagree, you disagree. But, you know, we can all disagree on certain stuff and still be cool. It's not, and like you said, if we're going to just be wish-washy about stuff, then I don't think, you know, what's the point? What's the point of having a Libertarian Party if we're just going to be, like you said, Democrat or Republican light? I don't see a point then.
Yeah, totally agreed. Well, we're coming up on an hour here pretty soon, so let's wrap it up with that.
Sure.
If you're in Arizona and you don't know what to do, the obvious solution is to move to New Hampshire and vote for Jeremy Kauffman. Or at least,
or like, you could move to Pennsylvania and vote for Fetterman.
Yeah, that was my next option. Like if that's not going to work for you, if you want to be a little bit further south, you can move to Pennsylvania and vote for Fetterman. It's always good to talk with you, Kyle. Where can people keep up with your show and your work?
For sure. I appreciate you having me on, man. And you can find me, Kyle Matovcik, on YouTube. That is KYLEMATOVCIK on YouTube. I got probably one of the biggest guests I've ever had on. Remington James has almost 700,000 subscribers on YouTube. That episode will be dropping tomorrow. And we go pretty deep on a lot of stuff. So I'm excited to share that with everybody. All major audio podcatchers you could find In Liberty and Health. My band is called A Common Crown. We'll hopefully have some new material here soon. Don't ask me when, but soon, I promise. And on Twitter at KYLEMATOVCIK. And, you know, like I said, dude, thanks for having me on. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, who put the C before the I when they were writing out your last name? Because that's confusing as hell. It should be like Matovcik, you know, like the silent C. That really throws me off every time. But
yeah,
it's okay. I'll let it go.
Yeah, it fucks everybody up. I've heard my dad say Matovcik, Matovcik, so I go with Matovcik. I run it that way.
There you go. All right, man. Well, we'll talk again soon. Everyone go follow his show. You won't be disappointed. Thanks for joining, man, and we'll do it again soon.
For sure, dude. Thanks.